So 5 noob mistakes have gone, they've all been pretty important, but this one is the big one. This is probably one of the, if not the biggest reason why all you noob players are struggling in the online world. And really, well, it's not even just noobs, plenty of more experienced players are falling into the same traps. This is more of a mentality and a way of thinking, rather than being a required physical skill or a massive knowledge. It's all about that over-defensive playstyle which I've mentioned before, which people think is the easier way to play the game, when in fact, it's a lot harder. Maybe campaign taught you that super defensive with lots of missiles and artillery is the way to win. Well, not in multiplayer. So tell me if you recognize this guy, because maybe he's basically you. He's got himself a nice army here, he's spaced it all out, nothing too close together, hasn't got too many missiles, only 2 archers and a catapult, so he's committing none of the major noob mistakes so far. He's got magic, he's formed up his army in a nice wide formation, he's ready to go. But upon seeing an enemy army barreling towards him, he goes from puffing his chest out with his big wide army to curling up into a nice little ball of shame inside his precious noob box. He's even put his cavalry inside the box. Cavalry, a unit that is almost useless without maneuverability. So why? Why did he do this? Why did he go from a big wide army into a box? Well, of course, it's because I'm flanking him. But why has he let me flank him and surround him and attack wherever I want to, instead of coming out to try and take some initiative and to take control of the situation? He's just turned into a box, and I'm now able to come in at every single angle I want to, attack where and when I want to. He doesn't have a say in it because he's let himself get surrounded by me. He hasn't tried to challenge me on any of the directions I've attacked from. He's allowed me to take all the initiative at the start of the battle. It's like he's gone, okay, you go first, I'll just sit in my box and try to react to whatever you do. Okay, I'm gonna die. If you're one of these players, you need to start taking some initiative. Stop letting the opponent do what the hell he wants to you. This kind of playstyle comes with the 2 big mistakes that I think make it so hard and ineffective to play. So, to a few examples, beginning with the Skaven here. This fella's got himself into a box from the get-go, he's got his little missile ranged corps in the middle here, and he's hoping that they're going to be able to take out the entire enemy army, while the rest of his army just protects them. Now, it's all about how many directions you're fighting in. He's got to fight the army in front of him, he's got to watch out for these warhounds that I'm sneaking around the back, so that's 2 directions. I'm also bringing some stuff in from my left, so that's a 3rd direction for him to worry about. And I'm bringing some cavalry round my right side, so he's got another direction to worry about. So that's 4 directions he's got to try and look in at all times to see what's going on, which is exactly what I'm trying to do to him. Here's another one, another Skaven player with the missile corps. Again, I'm Norska, I'm moving up, and I'm going to start to come from multiple directions to give him lots of things to look at, lots of things to worry about. And why am I doing that as a player? It's because I'm trying to force his micromanagement. I'm trying to force him to have to do lots of stuff very quickly. And in doing so, I'm hoping that he's going to make a mistake, which he very often will because he's rushing around, trying to look at all these different directions, trying to make all quick decisions, and he's bound to make a bunch of mistakes because he's panicking, because he's rushing, and he's getting surrounded. But how am I doing this? Is it because I'm the greatest player known to man? No, far from it. Player skill has little to do with it. I'm able to do this to him because he's letting me do it to him. He's not coming out and trying to challenge my flanking units. He's not trying to challenge what I'm doing to him. He's simply going to sit in his box, pick his ranged targets, and then try to react to whatever I do to him. Sound familiar? Instead of trying to impose his will and get matchups and situations he would like his army to be in, he simply lets me do that, and he's just going to try and stop me. Never a good way to go. So the first point to take away from all this, don't get surrounded. Why would you let someone surround you with whatever the hell they want? I'm pretty sure that in no battle in history ever did anyone ever go, oh, you know what's a good idea? We should get ourselves completely surrounded so we have to fight in all directions. Yeah. That is the best plan. No, that is of course the worst plan. Don't get me wrong though, it's by no means easy necessarily to stop someone from surrounding you, especially if they've got a bigger army than you. But sitting there idly like a sitting duck isn't going to get you anywhere. So that seems to be the first problem for newer players when they adopt this super defensive formation. They let the enemy player take all of the initiative or most of the initiative, and more often than not end up getting themselves enveloped and surrounded. But this is actually the smaller of the 2 problems. The bigger struggle here for the defensive player is in the decision making, I think. From the big decisions to all the hundreds of little decisions that are being made by both players at all times during a battle. Now let's say we've got a situation like one of the ones I just showed you footage of. We've got a defender who's staying put, who's not really moving, an attacker who's coming at him straight from the front, but who is also attacking him from all sides. So the attacker has made the decision to attack the front of the defender army. He's going to come in from the left and from the right, and he's also bringing some units to get in around the back of the enemy army. So this defender is surrounded. So let's say I just made 4 decisions there. I chose to attack from 4 different directions, 4 different decisions. Now at the bottom we're going to mark decisions here with little X's. For the attacker, there's 4 decisions made. Okay. Now for the defender, he has to counter what I'm doing because that's how he's chosen to play. He wants to play the counter fighter. So he's got to decide what to do about my front line, my left attack, my back attack, and my right attack. He's got to catch up with my 4 decisions because my decisions will be made in my best interest. They're trying to get me good matchups, not him. I'm going to get good things out of this. So let's say he counters my decisions, but he only counters 3 of them. Why? Because maybe he didn't see the 4th one. Because he's letting me take the initiative and control what happens, he has to try and catch everything I do. Let's say he didn't notice what I did at the back. And that's the problem with playing defensively. You wait for the attacker to make the moves and you try to react to them. But you can only react to them if you notice every single decision that the attacker made. And in the time it took you to react to those, the attacker has made 3 more decisions. So now you're falling behind in the decision making. And you know it. This is where players start to panic, they start to rush, and they start to make mistakes. And again, the defender makes a couple more decisions to try and counter what the attacker does so that he can get the good matchups and not the attacker. But in doing so, the attacker has made 4 more choices on where he wants to attack to get good matchups for him. And you can see this just goes on and on and on and on. And it's a constant battle of trying to take the initiative off the other player. I hope that makes some sense. I know this isn't the perfect way to illustrate it, but this is at least what I think is happening when I see someone playing super defensively. And I find it myself if I play a super defensive ranged army. This is often what happens. It's easy to fall into the trap of just waiting for the opponent to do what he wants and then trying to react to his decisions. It's a really tough way to play, and like I said, is actually harder than just being the one taking the initiative. And of course, that rush of decision making leads to those mistakes, which is the same thing that comes from being surrounded. So it all kind of goes hand in hand with playing too defensively. Let me try and give you an example of this. So here we've got a Wood Elf player facing my Norskans. Now, of course, I'm attacking him from all angles because that's what I try to do. He's just going to sit there and let me do what I want to him. I'm sending a big old party round my right side to come and flank him. That's my decision. His counter to my decision is to bring over some Wild Riders to get after my Warhounds, which is of course not a great decision. In doing so, he's left a big hole for my other Warhounds to get after his archers. Again, I've made the decision, now he's got to react. His reaction is to send over these spears. Now he's got a hole on that side where he used to have spears, and I'm munching on his archers. Now these Wild Riders have engaged my Warhounds, but I'm going to run away, send in the Skinwolves, and I'm countering his decision. I'm then sending the Warhounds after his other archers, taking some initiative. His response is to send over those other spears. But that's another mistake because he's left his other side exposed now. He is taking some initiative over here with a couple of skirmish calves, taking out mine, so that's one good move, but he's slowly falling behind in the decision making in the main army. He's just about got his archers freed up, but all the while I've got 2 manticores munching on his lord. I've just sea-fanged his front line and I've charged his front line. He didn't counter-charge me back. He is just slowly falling more and more behind in the decision making of everything that's happening. Of course, this battle is just a less experienced player that I'm fighting. But I think the reason he's struggling so hard is because he's falling behind constantly in that decision making, and he let me surround him. He let me choose where this battle was taken, and he let me choose what I wanted to do, and then he was just going to try and catch up and counter everything I do, rather than making his own aggressive decisions to try and hurt my army in some way. So if you want to play this defensively, you still need to have some more aggressive areas of your army that can stop and push and pressure the enemy so that he doesn't just do what he wants all over your army. This comes down more to army building though, which is something we will get to in the future. Now for just a little example of 2 players fighting for initiative. Here I've got my Orc boys moving up towards a High Elf player as Nagareth. He's got a front line of spearmen, good old High Elf spearmen. Not bad, but probably going to get their head kicked in by some wired up Orc boys. And he also has some Swordmasters. Now, as the battle progresses, he knows his spearmen aren't going to hold up well against those Orc boys, so he's pulling them back to the flank to protect from all my cavalry coming in, which obviously makes more sense because spears are good against cavalry, and swordmasters are going to be damn good against orc boys. So he's taken some initiative to get a better matchup for his unit rather than just sitting there and leaving the current matchup in place. So where the advantage was mine before, he's taken some initiative and now the advantage is his. I'm going to miss the micro of changing my target, so I'm not going to get my charge bonus here. So he's gained a good advantage. He's going to be able to destroy these orc boys very quickly, no problem, as he does. So he's taken some initiative and it's paid off. But it's my turn to grab that initiative back. I'm going to pin his swordmasters in place and hit them with a foot of Gork. And there goes half their health. So there's me taking some initiative back and trying to gain an advantage, hurting one of his more expensive and powerful units. I lost a unit of orc boys, which is probably about 400 funds of damage, but he lost half health of swordmasters, which is probably worth more than 400. Although I did have to use up some magic, so it probably evens out. But either way, I had the initiative, he took it back by bringing up the swordmasters, and I took it back by wiping out those swordmasters with a good old foot of Gork. So it's a constant back and forth battle between who has the advantage, and you need to take initiative to be able to do that. If you only ever try to stop your opponent gaining advantages, then you miss out on a lot of opportunities for yourself gaining advantages. And all these little situations are going on across the battlefield at all times, and there's lots of them. That's all Total War battles really are, is two players fighting to get the best matchups for their units. If you just sit there and let the enemy get all of his good matchups for his army, you are going to lose. So I hope that gives you a good insight into what it takes to win battles. It's a battle of taking the initiative and gaining advantages. If you just sit there, it's very hard to do that. Honestly, there's loads more on this topic I could go into, but I'm trying to keep this video to about 10 minutes. In future videos, I'm sure I'll talk about it more. And as I mentioned in the previous video, it's not that you can never ever play defensively or that it's necessarily a bad way to play, but your approach to doing it may be the problem. You can still have the main part of your army be defensive and rangy, but you may need a couple of groups that are there to protect your flanks and protect the rear of your army. They'll need to be maneuverable, they'll need to play aggressively, they can't just sit inside the box. This also doesn't mean that everyone has to start playing rush armies, just because playing defensive is a bit harder, although you should definitely try it out. You should also take note of which faction you're fighting. If you're playing the High Elves and you come up against Norska, it's a 99% certainty that Norska is going to rush you. They're not going to engage you in a back and forth ranged skirmish, as you might get if you face the Empire, because they have a lot of strong missiles and like to play that skirmish game just like the High Elves do. So if you see that you're facing the Empire, you might be okay to go for that defensive game plan you like. But if you're facing Norska, that defensive game plan might not be such a good idea because they'll be able to get all over your missiles. So you may be better off going for a more aggressive rushy approach yourself. So there you go. Take some initiative if you want to win your battles. Sitting there and letting the opponent impose his will upon you is going to get you nowhere fast. Except for maybe a graveyard. So don't be afraid to play a bit more aggressively, try out some rush armies, try out having a few more rushy elements to your army while you can still have the main core being a bit defensive, experiment with it. But don't curl up into a box as soon as an army approaches you. You're going to get surrounded and you're probably going to fall behind in that decision making. I hope you've enjoyed this, thanks for watching, I will see you in the future.